Hello, everybody. So, a recap and possibly a way of making sure everybody's on the same page going into next week here in the French phonetics class. Let's talk about what we discussed this week. Just a broad overview of what we discussed this past week. We started by looking at the sounds that we are going to be working with, right? We talked a little bit about the differences between sounds that we make in English and sounds that we make in French. We talked specifically about the fact that because American English has diphthongs, right? Different vowels that sort of blend with each other, that it is entirely possible for English, especially American English words, to have two separate vowels in the same syllable, right? If we say, for example, tie, we know this is a one-syllable word, tie. But we also realize that in French, if we use the same word, right, instead of tie, we have taille, that functionally it feels like there's not much of a difference, but linguistically there is. The American English tie, let's use the spelling T-I-E, right, has an I-E, and it blends from the ah to the E sound, right? For the French, they realize that tie is it's a different sound, right? We have ta and then y, right? We have that semi-vowel at the end. Is this a way of adding a diphthong without calling it one? Linguistically, no. And we can tell that because if we hold out a vowel in English and in French, we will often see that there is a functional difference. When we try to hold out the vowel in the English version of the word tie, where is the vowel? You can try it certainly, where you are. And when we look at it in French, ta, ye, right? We get a taille, right? We don't go into the E, we go down into the y, right? And we know that that y sound is going to be a semi-vowel and not another vowel sound entirely. Tie, in English, we have the E at the end, right? We have that distinction. So we look at English and we look at French as functionally doing different things with vowels that we're going to continue to explore throughout the semester. Continuing on, we also this week discussed specifically where these sounds are made. One of the things that we're doing, of course, in exploring the sounds and exploring the phonetic symbols that we've looked at this week, which for your purposes, I believe, for some of you, it's in the appendix section. If you have the second edition of the book, which eventually you may all wish to take a look at purchasing, right? Because it's a good version. What we have is we have those notation phonétique, and then we have our vocabulary list, our list of phonetic symbols, right next to it. In pronouncing all of those and learning those symbols, we are talking a lot about the fact that vowel sounds in French are much more pure, but that they also, right, allow us to start exploring where these sounds exist in our mouths, using both this book, the phonetic symbols that we have here, and the the Canvas page, OSU is coming back to me, the Canvas page that we've had and those class resources. Make sure, of course, when you click on that French Wikipedia IPA, that you do change the language, right? You do want to change it to French. I don't know why it won't do it automatically. It's a little bit frustrating to me. But we do want to get that vocabulary under our belts as well. This week, going into next, we are going to be shifting a great deal actually into French, trying to discuss a lot of the vocabulary, a lot of the positioning of sound, and a lot of the terminology of phonetics into French. That way we go from talking about open and closed to ouvert, fermé. That we go from talking about voiced and non-voiced into either sourd et sonore or voisé and non-voisé, right? We looked at those two terms, as being sort of equivalent, and we've noticed that even the way they are described linguistically in the wiki pages for these sounds does give them a little bit of leeway, right? We see sourd, we see sonore, we see voisé, we see non-voisé, right? What we need to remember, of course, is anytime we use sourd or non-voisé, what we're talking about is no involvement necessarily with the vocal cords, whereas sonore, voisé, voiced, right, and sonorous, right, means that we're getting input from the vocal cords. We still can make sounds without the vocal cords. We know this. We know that we've talked about things like p and t, right, that these are not insignificant sounds, and that they do involve, right, air being expelled, and that in the middle of a sentence, right, they will involve our vocal cords stopping briefly to allow this expulsion of air. For example, in the term papa, right, we can hear very specifically, right, pa, be, pa, pa, right? We hear the vocal cords start and stop. Those are going to be significant things for us. And of course, something else that we talked about that's going to be significant for us is when we are speaking, pronouncing, that we are paying attention to, again, where are the noises being made? What is going to be an easier way for us to, at times, pick out these symbols and know exactly how to pronounce them without basically being confident in those things, right? What we discussed this week that is going to be very helpful is in your list of vocabulary and your sounds from the phonetic alphabet, either in your appendix or in that chart at the beginning of the chapter in the second edition, that we look at sounds like baby, belle, and we start differentiating between the two, realizing that overall, a general rule of thumb is going to be when we have a vowel that comes at the end of a syllable, that is at the end of a syllable, and that is kind of what we would refer to as in a non-trapped position, right? That sound can be more closed as far as our mouth is concerned, right? And that when it's trapped in between two consonants, it's a little bit more open. So our B versus our belle, right? We hear that difference between B, belle, right? That in L is sort of trapped in between. We see the same thing when we have the difference between P and peur. P, peur, and those are going to be very small differences, but significant. One thing that you can count on when it comes to phonetic pronunciation is that the more we practice, the better we'll get. But the other thing is that the more we practice, the more we'll realize that our pronunciation of various words pushes us almost into this position, that vowel sounds develop and change based on what comes after them, right? Our is different from our because we are preparing to go into a different sound, right? Our syllable by itself, the end of the syllable, right, allows us to sort of start over in a way, right, allows our mouths to start over, whereas when we have a mid-syllable vowel, we are on our way into another sound, and it functionally changes the way that sound comes out of our mouths, right? And so, p and peur sort of develop in that way. Could you say peur? Well, yeah, but actually, if you try it, if you say p and peur, it feels weird, right? And it might not feel weird right now, right? You may look at that and say, oh, I can make that sound. That sounds perfectly fine for me. But as you continue to practice, as we continue to work through this, you'll start noticing that some sounds start feeling incorrect when you try to pronounce them in a way that's not correct. Your mouth, your tongue, your vocal apparatus will say, I don't like this. I don't like the way this is working, right? This is sort of the shift that I'm going to be hoping you're going to be seeing throughout the semester, and especially if we continue using a lot of French and using a lot of these techniques, my hope is that it's going to push your language, right, in that direction. It will not happen, of course, without a lot of concentration. It won't happen without practice, right? We are going to be practicing a lot. So, you know, as much as I know that you will, right, I do want you to, you know, take a lot of these pronunciation exercises seriously, to be listening to yourself, to be listening to the way you're pronouncing things, and to be concentrating, you know, even more than maybe even feels normal on the way that it feels to pronounce these sounds. Where do they live? Where are they, you know, focused in your mouth? Especially with vowels, those are going to be very important. So, right, again, we've got our e and our e. We've got our and our We've got our o and our right? So we have as well trop, and we have done. Trop, done. Trop, done. And you even can see a little bit in the way that I am pronouncing it, in the way that my mouth moves. Trop, done. Trop, done. I open more when I say done, right? This is the type of thing you should be looking for, right, in your own pronunciation. If you can record video kind of like this, watching your mouth, you know, as you're pronouncing things, or if you want to practice in front of a mirror, it will give you, again, right, like we talked about with babies, looking at people's mouths as they're pronouncing things, it will give you that visual that helps you to see, oh, I should be opening further, I should be closing more, I should be, you know, rounding my lips more, I should be less round, right? So our problematic sounds, I'll call them problematic at this point in time, are going to be our e and our e, our and our o and our right? And then, of course, also looking into the l sound, right? Which is a little more rounded, right? L, you know, and is there a difference between p and l? We'll talk about that, right? We're going to get to that in here, talking about that mute E and about the problems that we might have with it. Again, it is very much a challenge that sometimes pronouncing these sounds individually without any other sounds around them, isolating them by themselves, doesn't always serve us terribly well. Sometimes we have to continue pronouncing and reading and then thinking as we're reading, how am I pronouncing a l? As in le, la, le. How am I pronouncing a s? As in se, sa, se, right? Is there a difference between se and sieu, right? Or se and se? It's difficult to tell, right? But we will be continuing to look at this. So, let's land here for now, right? What I would like you, of course, to do this week is in your books, wherever you may be finding it, you are going to be looking at the quatre phrases. So to end today, I will read this phrase, and then we will, I will ask you to pronounce it together with me the last time I do it. So I'm going to do it 2 times, right? Listen, watch, and then the last time through, you're going to be pronouncing it with me. So here we go. Patrick et sa femme Annick habitent à Lille et il passe le mois de février chez sa mère qui est parisienne. Patrick et sa femme Annick habitent à Lille et il passe le mois de février chez sa mère qui est parisienne. Now together with me. Patrick et sa femme Annick habitent à Lille et il passe le mois de février chez sa mère qui est parisienne. So, work on that phrase. I know that there are some small differences in the way that we see it in both books, right? That in the second edition, the one that I am reading from, we see Patrick et sa femme Annick habitent à Lille. So we only have one of those syllable groups that ends with a consonant, Lille. And that in the other book, we do see Annick by itself, right? Annick is ends up being being 2 syllables. Annick, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that, and the differences, the differences in preference, right? The French do prefer as much as possible to end syllables on consonants when they can, especially in rhythmic groups. But of course, things change, right? This is a very simple phrase. This might not be indicative of everything. I will tell you that the majority, of syllables do tend to end on vowels, right? In this in French language, right? It's just simply the way that the language is kind of developed. Do we, is that a rule, to be followed all the time? Well, no, clearly not, right? If we say the word femme, right, we're ending with an M, right? But if we have femme in another, context in the middle of a sentence, we might see, right, fa, ma, right? So we'll take a look, right? We'll see how all of those things work. So I will see you all next week. Continue to be waiting for some of these videos and for some additional work that I'm going to be asking you to do for next week. And préparez pour le français. We're going to be switching things, right, and discussing our different parts of speech and our different methods of pronouncing sounds in French much more next week. À bientôt.